everyone, I am Shahana and now I am glad to share the complete list of presidents of the Philippines and their achievements and contributions. The records were from 1898 when General Emilio Aguinaldo sat at the office of the president where President Rodrigo Duterte leads our beloved country.
In the first list, Emilio Aguinaldo. He sat in January 23, 1899 to March 23, 1901. Emilio Aguinaldo was the first president of the Philippines First Republic, also known as the Malolos Republic. He was inaugurated in January 23, 1899 at the Church of Malolos, Bulacan. He led the proclamation of the Philippines independence on Jan 12, 1898 in this central home in Kawit, Cavite. This is the contribution and achievement of Emilio Aguinaldo. He waved the Philippines flag in declaring the independence of the Philippines in 1898. He was the first and only president of the First Republic, Malolos Republic, the youngest Filipino president taking office at age of 28. Emilio Aguinaldo had Bachelor of Arts College Preparatory at the Colegios de San Juan de Letral in 1880. Our next is Manuel L. Quezon. Manuel L. Quezon was the second president of the Philippines and the first president of the Philippines Commonwealth established under the USA. He was inaugurated on December 30, 1941. In Corregidor Island, he is known as the father of the national language, ama ng wikang pambansa. He died of the tuberculosis in Saranac Lake, New York. This is some of the achievement and contribution of Manuel L. Quezon. First President elected through a national election. First Senate President elected as President of the Philippines. The first President of the Philippines under the Commonwealth. Initiated women's suffrage in the Philippines during the Commonwealth. Our next is si C.P. Laurel. He sat on October 14, 1943 and August 17, 1945. Jose P. Laurel was the third president of the Philippines and the president of the Second Philippines Republic. His inauguration was on October 14, 1943. In the Legislative Building, now National Museum, he served president of the Philippines during the Japanese occupation during World War II. This is some contribution and achievement of Jose P. Laurel. Jose P. Laurel is the only Philippines president who served the three branches of government. He became a senator, congressman, associated justice, and president. Since the early 1960s, Laurel was recognized as legitimate president of the Philippines. Next is Sergio Osmeña Sr. Sergio Osmeña Sr. was the fourth president of the Philippines and the second president of the Commonwealth. He was inaugurated in August 1, 1944 in Washington, D.C. He succeeded the presidency after the death of the President Manuel L. Quezon. During his administration, the Philippines joined the International Monetary Fund. This is some the contribution and achievements of Sergio Osmeña. Sergio Osmeña was the first Visayan to become president born in Cebu City. He joined with U.S. General Douglas MacArthur in Leyte on October 20, 1944 to begin restoration of Philippines' freedom after Japanese occupation. He also a founder of the Nacionalista Party. Philippines National Bank was rehabilitated and the country joined the International Monetary Fund during the presidency. Our next Manuel A. Rojas. Manuel A. Rojas was the fifth president of the Philippines, the third and last president under the Commonwealth, and the first president of the Third Republic of the Philippines. He was inaugurated on May 28, 1946, and the National Museum building he held office for only 1 year and 10 months and 18 days. Some of contributions of Manuel Rojas was inaugurated as the first president of a new republic after World War II. Our next was Elpidio R. Quirino. Elpidio Quirino was the sixth president of the Philippines and the second president of the Third Republic. He succeeded presidency after incumbent President Manuel Rojas died in 1948. Quirino was 57 years old when he was inaugurated as president on April 17, 1948 at the Malacanang Place. Contribution and achievement of Elpidio Quirino was a hukbalahap guerrilla movement was active during the presidency. He created the Social Security Commission. He created the Integrity Board to monitor graft and corruption. During his term, Quezon City became became capital of the Philippines in 1948. Completed Bachelor of Law in the University of the Philippines in 1915. Seventh President was Ramon Magsaysay Sr. Ramon Magsaysay was the seventh President of the Philippines and the third President of the Third Republic. He was the first President who swam into the office wearing barong Tagalog during the inauguration. He died in an aircraft disaster while boarding the presidential place. This is some of Ramon Magsaysay's contribution and achievement. He led in the defeat the Hukbalahap movement, chairman of the Committee of Guerrilla Affairs. His presidency was referred to as the Philippines' golden years for the lack of corruption. Our eighth president was Carlos P. Garcia. Carlos P. Garcia is the 18th President of the Philippines and 4th President of the Third Republic of the Bohol. Native was a lawyer, poet, and professor and served as a guerrilla leader. During the Pacific War, Garcia served as Vice President under Ramon Magsaysay and as Secretary of Foreign Affairs for 4 years. He became President when Magsaysay died in the plane crash in 1957. This is some contribution of achievement of Carlos P. Garcia. Carlos P. Garcia was known for promoting Filipino First policy which favored Filipino business over foreign investors. Our ninth president was Diosdado P. Macapagal. Diosdado P. Macapagal was the ninth president of the Philippines. He was a lawyer of economist born in Lubao, Pampanga. He was inaugurated on December 30, 1961 at the Quirino Grandstand. His daughter Gloria Macapagal Arroyo followed this path and became president too. Some of contribution and achievement of Diosdado Macapagal was top in the bar exam, first place in 1936. Took a Master of Law in 1941 and Doctor of Civil Law in 1947 and a PhD in Economics in 1957. Our 10th president was a Ferdinand Marcos, was the 10th president of the Philippines and the last president of the Third Republic. He was one of the most controversial leaders of the 20th century. He ruled the Philippines for 21 years and he was removed from the office after the People-Powered Revolution. And this is the contribution and achievement of Ferdinand Marcos, the first president to win a second term, the longest ruling president of the Philippines. He ruled for 21 years. He declared martial law in September 22, 1972. Our 11th president was Corazon C. Aquino. Corazon Aquino was the first woman president of the Philippines and the first woman to become president of an Asian country. She was the 11th president and a democracy icon of the 100 women who shaped world history and 20 most influential Asian of the 20th century. Our next president, the 12th one, is Fidel V. Ramos. Fidel B. Ramos is the 20th president of the Philippines and the oldest living former president of the country. Fidel V. Ramos is now 92 years old. He is one of the most admired presidents because during his presidency, he restored economic growth and stability in the country. The 13th president, Joseph E. Estrada. Joseph Estrada is the 13th president of the Philippines and the first film actor to become a president in the country. During his years in office, economic growth was slow, and he faced impeachment proceedings. He became the first president Asia to be impeached from an executive role. He was outside from the presidency in 2001. Our next was Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Gloria Macapagal Arroyo is the 14th president of the Philippines and the second female president and the first Filipino president whose parent was a former president. She was an economist like her father, ex-president Diosdado Macapagal. Having a master's degree and doctorate in economics, Gloria put the Philippines economy back in shape. Our next was Benigno Aquino III. Benigno Aquino, it was the 15th president of the Philippines. He was the first bachelor president, a son of ex-president Corazon Aquino. He was called as Noynoy or Pinoy. Noynoy finished his economic degree from Ateneo de Manila University. He was one of the students of a former economics professor, Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, and the president before him. The 60th and the president, Rodrigo Roa Duterte, president of the 60th President of the Philippines. He's one of the most loved president. He's earned a massive fan base after transforming one of the most dangerous cities, which is Davao, into one of the world's safest when he was a mayor. At age of 71, he became the oldest Filipino ever elected the presidency. And lastly, our newest president in the Philippines was Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. won a landslide victory in the Philippines presidential election. According to unofficial results, bringing his family back to power in Manila 36 years after his dictator father fled the country. Thank you for listening, and I hope you understand what I reported. And that was the list of the president in the Philippines.